Good morning. Well, almost afternoon. Good morning to you all. My name is TRACY METZ. I'm a journalist and author, originally from Los Angeles, but I have lived in the Netherlands now for over half my life. And I'm here because I have a particular interest in water. I'm the author of the book, which I'm happy to say the speakers have received as a gift, Sweet and Salt, Water and the Dutch. And this book came forth from my interest in how the Dutch deal with that little tiny bit of space that they have here in the European Delta. And also it came forth from my membership of the Delta Commission, which was a government commission installed in 2007-2008 to advise government on water safety in the next 1 to 2 centuries. I think that really says something about the Dutch approach. The Dutch think far ahead because dealing with water in a sensible fashion is absolutely essential to the survival of this country. I'm here today in a double capacity. I'm going to give you a quick run through the book just to give you an idea what it's about and about what the new Dutch approach to water management is all about. And then I will change caps and I will become your moderator for the rest of the afternoon. So first a quick run through Sweet and Salt. Sweet and Salt was a book about the new Dutch approach to water management, letting the water in, controlled flooding, sometimes even lowering the dikes rather than raising the dikes, which of course in this country is no less than a revolution. And the Sweet and Salt was also an exhibition in the Kunsthal in Rotterdam. So half the book is about landscape design and engineering, and the other half is about art. And I think the art is really important because it shows the relationship that the Dutch have to their water. And that is a very intimate relationship, which I think we can best characterize as water as our frenemy, our friend and our enemy. These are pictures that I took from the plane ride that we took as Delta Commission to try and get an overview over that water, which is really quite difficult in such a flat country. You need some kind of elevated position, and it's really hard to find that position. So we took a flight and had a look at what water actually means in Netherlands. It means recreation, it means fun, it means danger, it means a source of life, of energy. It is basically everything to this country. It was also a subject for the painter Van Gogh, the very famous painter Vincent van Gogh, who painted this fisherman couple in the 19th century, and also a source of inspiration to this fashion designer who designed sexy fisherwoman's outfits based perhaps on the Van Gogh images. As I mentioned, and as I'm sure you know, the Netherlands is truly dependent on water management for its survival because about half the country would otherwise be underwater without this extremely sophisticated system of dikes and pumps and levees, and 60 to 70% of the gross national product is earned below sea level. Almost our whole economy is below sea level. I mean, if you let that sink in and realize what that means in the way of your dependency on keeping the water out, or at least coming to some kind of agreement with the water. This is a painting from the 15th century showing that in spite of everything the Dutch do to keep their country safe, they do not always succeed. This was a dike breach very near Amsterdam. And my favorite image, which is hard to see, is this little guy here. He is hanging on by his fingernails for dear life, hoping that he won't be swept away in the flood. In 1953, that did happen. This poor fellow would have been swept away. 1953, I'm sure you heard about it yesterday during the excursion to the Delta Works, was a traumatic event for the Netherlands. 1,800 people died in one night. 400,000 people homeless, millions of animals drowned, and a huge amount of damage to the economy. It did yield some very beautiful pictures. I hope you don't find this too ironic, but drama is sometimes very beautiful. 2003. We are still not disaster-free. This was a small disaster, but it was rather unsettling. It was a dike that breached in the hot summer of 2003, showing that no matter how good the defenses look, this can still be a very current problem. And this is in itself not a national disaster, but it did bring 12 million euros worth of damage. And I think that tells us how quickly this accrues and how much is really dependent on this system. Okay, 1993, 1995, big floods in the south of the country. I'm not undermining Dutch water management, I'm just trying to make it a little more relative. You know the saying, shit will happen. Well, sometimes it does. But this is about the Dutch answer to that shit. This is just one image to show you what the changing circumstances are that everywhere in the world, including the Netherlands, now has to deal with. This is an image from the winter. Winters are supposed to be wet. Winters are supposed to be full of raging rivers and snowstorms and rain. This is our most important shipping artery, the River de Waal, in the middle of the winter. That's one of the reasons that the Dutch are now looking for a new way to deal with water, because circumstances are changing and we simply cannot go on doing what we've done all those centuries, even though going on doing what you've always done really is a sort of inherent human attitude. So kicking and screaming, the Dutch are being forced to rethink their approach. One of the traditional Dutch approaches has been dikes, which I think are absolutely fascinating objects. They're really just boring piles of dirt, basically. But the way you can configure the landscape and give people a sense of landscape, a sense of proportion, and also that elevation that we need to see the landscape is one of the really important roles that dikes play in the landscape. This one here near one of the big rivers is one of my favorites. You really see what a presence a dike can be in the Dutch landscape. The Dutch have also become past masters at infrastructure for managing water. This is a huge system of locks between sweet, fresh, sweet and salt water bodies. And this, did you go there yesterday? To the Maaslandkering? Okay, this is one of the delta works, the most recent of the delta works, and the most flexible. These are the sea gates that protect Rotterdam. When the sea gets really high, otherwise the river would flood and flood Rotterdam. So in those circumstances, these gates swing shut, as you can see on the image, and when the threat has passed, they swing open again. And I think this is what we're moving towards, is a much more flexible system of water safety when we just use it when we need it. Okay, I want to just give you a quick overview of some of the brilliant things that the Dutch are thinking up to deal with this new system of these new problems with water, and therefore new solutions. And do keep in mind that this is really innovative because the Dutch are taking leave of the way they've always done things, and we all know how hard that is. This is a parking garage in Rotterdam, which is designed to store rainwater until the water can slowly seep back into the sewer or into the groundwater. I think all cities know that combined sewer overflow is one of the big problems now, that we have these heavy rain showers. The sewers can't cope, the rain comes crashing down, and it all comes crashing back out again and floods the streets. So this idea is to store the water temporarily so that it can gradually seep back into the system. This is another system for doing the same thing. These are what are called flood squares, also in Rotterdam. The idea is that you make a simple, pleasant urban amenity, a city square where children can play and neighbors can chat, and then as it starts to rain harder and harder, as you can see, then it serves as a water basin, a catchment area, to gradually let the water seep back down. And I think examples like this are important for our subject today about preservation and heritage, because these are measures that can help us control the burden of the excess of water that so many cities now suffer from, and let it gradually get absorbed back into the system. Another approach that appeals to imagination of people everywhere, not just here, is floating housing. This is a project here in Amsterdam. This is an idea for a floating pool in the former harbor of Rotterdam. I really hope this gets built. It looks wonderful, made of shipping containers. This is an idea also in the harbor of Rotterdam for a floating park. I thought this was intriguing because I had never stopped to think that you could not just make a single object, but actually make public space on the water in the form of floating objects that you can tow from one side to the other. Also in Rotterdam, as you can see, Rotterdam, I think, is a very innovative city in this respect. This is a suggestion to build a new swimming pool, an Olympic swimming pool in this case, in the dikes along the river the Maas, the Meuse. Building with nature is the theme of the new Dutch approach, and I think this is what this design speaks to. This is the sand engine, which is off the coast near The Hague. And the idea is that rather than replenishing the beaches every year, again and again, disturbing the ecosystem with bulldozers, that you dump one huge amount of sand all at one time off the coast and then let nature do the work. It's cheaper, it's less invasive, and this is being monitored very closely for the next 20 years to see if nature really does what we think nature should do. There is, of course, a certain arrogance in this assumption that nature will, of course, do what we think she should, but we're not quite sure yet. So this is being closely monitored, and I know there's been interest from several other countries to see if this is a feasible way of protecting coastlines. The Dutch are now also working to integrate water safety with improving the urban landscape. This is the coast of the beach town of Scheveningen. That's where those Van Gogh fishermen came from, by the way. The idea is to integrate the sea dike into the new boulevard, and if you have a chance to go there, it is absolutely lovely. The only unfortunate thing is that you don't see that the dike is under the boulevard. You have to know. So whether that's a good thing or not, I'm not sure. Another beautiful design for water storage out in the countryside. I really like this design because I think it's a wonderful combination of the natural and the man-made. This also is designed to store water so it can gradually seep back into the system. You see that the meanders are clearly a metaphor for the movement of a river. At the same time, you see that those meanders are totally man-made. And I think this is really a representative of the new mentality of bringing the natural and the man-made in this artificial landscape back together. Not everyone is enthusiastic about this idea of lowering the dikes. This farmer said, "I don't believe in that water." And I thought, is water something you can believe in or not? It's just a simple fact. But to him, the idea that the Dutch government is trying to tell him that lowering the dikes is safer than raising the dikes, he is simply not buying it. So yes, this is a new Dutch approach, but do know that there are people who, perhaps of another generation, really have a hard time accepting this new mentality of coming to some kind of cordial relationship with water. This man's farm was right here. And you can see the dikes are going to be lowered here so that when the water in the river is high, the water can run through this agricultural area and out again at the bottom. He almost had to move. And the idea that he would have to give up his 3-generation farm to make way for water when the government is supposed to protect him against that water, for him this was a really difficult mental jump. So he was very lucky that ultimately he could stay. There's another approach which goes back to the medieval approach of the Dutch, building mounds to be safe from the water. This is another agricultural area in the southwest of the country. The farmers banded together when they heard that the dikes were going to be lowered and that the water would be coming back into their area. They banded together and said, we want to continue farming here, but then on mounds. So that when the water comes in, as you can see on this right-hand image, they will be able to continue farming without suffering any damage. And this is a particularly interesting project because this is the only project I know of where inhabitants actually didn't just say, no, buy us out, pay us more money, but actually were proactive in creating a plan of their own to see how they could deal with new circumstances. And this affects us all as individuals. It is not just a government issue. And I think this plan really shows how individuals have accepted the new reality and are moving forward to find new answers. Of course, those answers aren't really new, are they? The Dutch have been building on mounds ever since 1100. So that's another reason I like this project, because you see that old solutions are coming back in a new dressed as innovation. One of the last examples I want to show you is from a huge national project called Room for the River. As in many countries, I know the Mississippi, many countries have straightened and tightened their rivers to improve shipping. That's an economic issue. Everyone does it, but it does have consequences. The Dutch have discovered, as I showed you in that image of flooding from the mid-90s, that the rivers, as they start to, the discharge starts to grow, coming down from the Alps in this case, and from more rain, there's no place to go but over. if there's too much river water, you automatically get floods. And the idea is to stop that flooding by making the rivers broader, giving them more space to expand when necessary. And this is the river de Waal, the one I showed you that had fallen completely dry in the winter. And this is the new bypass that has been created to give space for the water when needed. And this means that the landscape is becoming more flexible. Sometimes it's wet, sometimes it's dry. And this is not something we're used to. We just want places to be like they are. We don't want them to start changing their manifestations all of a sudden. So this is, I think, a revolution in the way, especially the Dutch with their very controlled landscape, are dealing with an issue like flexibility. This man built his house next to the river de Waal, where he knew it would flood. So he built this raised basement. And he had only lived there for 2 months when, indeed, the river flooded, and I called him and I said, well, did it work? And it does work. And I wanted to show you this because I think it's interesting the way these new problems are also creating new solutions in landscape design, in urban design, and also in the very direct field of architecture in individual buildings. Almost my last. This is an important moment in Dutch history, in the contribution of the Dutch to the happiness of mankind. This is the birth of a new potato. And what we see here is the potato trader coming to the island of Texel in the north of the country to taste this potato and to decide if the potato was going to be admitted into potato paradise, namely the global potato trade. And that's important because if you're not in the global trade, you're not in business. And what's special about this potato is that it's a salt-resistant potato. Grown and developed on the island of Texel. It grew in salty ground because as the sea level rises and pushes against the coast, the salinity pushes further and further into the arable land. All over the world, there's more than 1 billion hectares of arable land which is no longer usable for food production because it's so salty. That's why they say that this is a major contribution to the future of mankind, because this can really help food production if you can grow potatoes that are salt resistant. So it grows in salty ground, it's irrigated with ocean water, and it grows in salty air. I had lunch with this salty potato, and it's not salty. I really expected it to be, you know, pré-salé. But it's not, because all the salt stays in the leaves, which means that it is indeed, if it can be rolled out as a new product in the saline arable lands of the world, that this really can make a major contribution, as small as the potato is. We know where this is, eh? This is Katrina. This is one of the perhaps most shocking disasters in recent history that I think really everybody still has on in their minds. This is an even more recent disaster. This was after Sandy in New York. Forgive me as an American that I take examples from the US. I could take them from all around the world. Katrina got the Dutch thinking about how they deal with water and people safety. We don't have evacuation plans here, which never ceases to amaze my American friends. After Katrina, the Dutch started thinking, well, maybe we should work on this. Maybe we should tell people what to do if the system should fail. One of the things we did was to hold a national drill in 2008 called Waterproof. And one of the parts of Waterproof was evacuating not just people, but also animals. As I mentioned, millions of animals died in the flood of 1953. And animals also represent a lot of capital. So they decided that they should have a drill evacuating animals. But, you know, animals don't want to be evacuated. They don't understand that they have to leave the warm barn. They kick and they bite and they run away. So, you know, really basically the system is okay. So why should we go to all this trouble to use real animals who don't want to cooperate? Why don't we just do a drill with plastic animals? Because at least they stand still. They cooperate. I love this image with these guys standing here chatting and having a cigarette and evacuating their very cooperative animals. It says to me so much about the tremendous faith that the Dutch have in their system. Yes, yes, of course we have to have a drill. Yes, it's a good idea, but let's not exaggerate. And finally, I want to leave you with a very American image. This is a farmer in the town of Vicksburg, Mississippi, near the Mississippi River. during one of the recent floods. There have been several in recent years of the Mississippi. And this guy is not sitting around waiting for government to help him. He has gotten out his bulldozer, or maybe his neighbor's bulldozer, and has built his own dike. I think this really is very representative of the huge gap between the American mentality of everyone for himself and the Dutch mentality in which water and dealing with water, also innovation in this field, is a collective issue. The Dutch really are all in this together. And I think if I have a mission with the book Sweet and Salt, which to tell you the truth as a journalist, I don't really, but if you want to see a mission in it, I think it's to try to show that even for countries where the situation is so different, the US is huge, the Netherlands are tiny, US hates government, the Dutch have a very strong government planning tradition, that even so, there is a lot to be learned from the sense that we are all in this together. We're going to have to find solutions together. And I hope that, I think that a lot can be learned from the Dutch approach to working together on prevention, rather than everybody fighting his own battle and repairing everything after the fact. That costs billions, which we no longer have. And this is now one farm, but I think this applies also very much to our subject of today, to our heritage. Maybe our heritage is on an island like this farm if we don't work together to find collective answers to these new problems. That's it. Thank you very much.